Hey everybody, Mike Burkholder, Contra Costa. Today I have BART Board of Director Joel Keller, former Antioch Mayor. He's in the house today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Mike. Thanks for asking me.
Good. So I wanted to have Joel on because I've seen him around at different events. We've never really sat down and had an in-depth conversation, and I want to talk BART and kind of just let him showcase what's actually going on. I know a lot of media is putting out some negative things and kind of want to clear the air. And so what's going on with BART? What are some cool things?
So Mike, thanks for the opportunity. Let me first talk about the BART to Antioch extension because I think that's what your viewers are probably most interested in. We're on schedule for a May opening. We'll be able to announce a date in the next couple of months. Things are going very well. One of the frustrations for a lot of people is they see these trains running up and down in the median and wonder why they can't get on them today. The contract is not quite complete. There are still punch list items that have to be finished off before we accept the total project. And there's a training period. The employees, the train operators have a 12-week training period, and each and every one of those cars has to be certified as safe by the Public Utilities Commission. So while it's frustrating, this time period is important to ensure that when we do open, we have safe, reliable transportation from Antioch to the transfer station just outside of Pittsburg Bay Point Station.
And I think what you said there was really interesting with a 12-week training period, because the worst thing in the world, you open the station, something happens, now it's shut down again, and people are even more mad. So, which kind of brings up the other part. You guys just brought in new carts, and what's going on with that? Because I know the media is kind of putting out some, I don't want to say misinformation, but they're definitely hyping it up as a big negative, which, I mean, it is, but it's not, it's expected, correct?
Right, and the cars that are been ordered for the BART system, we have an order of 775 cars. We currently have a 10-car train that's been certified for revenue service by the Public Utilities Commission, and this is the precursor to the order of the remainder of the 765 cars. Now, without question, when these cars don't function, they're embarrassing for myself, the board, the district, and our employees. But if we're going to have mishaps, mishaps is really not the right word. If we're going to have parts of the train that don't function, we would rather have that occur now before we receive the additional 765 trains. So whatever we identify as not functioning adequately in this difficult revenue environment, we can have fixed at the factory before these new cars are delivered. This is incredibly important because once the cars are delivered, the warranty period starts, and we want to be sure as many as flaws as possible are identified before the warranty expires. So while it is embarrassing, there's no question about it, it would be great to get these 10 cars and have absolutely nothing go wrong with them. It's not unexpected that there will be some things that are identified that need to be modified, need to be corrected, and that's a good thing. Because they can be done at the factory before the cars are delivered to us and the warranty begins.
And just where are the cars being made?
So the cars are being assembled in Plattsburgh, New York, and trucked across the country. Interestingly enough, my wife's family is in Pittsburgh, and we were on Highway 80 going to Sharon, Pennsylvania last year, and we saw a BART car on a flatbed truck coming out to Hayward, California. So I didn't get my camera out fast enough, and in rural areas the off ramps are a distance apart. Yep. So we couldn't get off and turn around, but I would have loved to get a picture of that car coming out to California.
So you've been at this a long time. You were elected mayor of Antioch in 1984.
That's right.
Re-elected 2 additional times?
That's correct.
And so you kind of know what's going on in Antioch. You were then elected to the BART board in 94?
That's correct.
Oh, got it right. So having all this experience and being with on the BART board for almost 20 years, what's it like to finally get a BART station out here? Granted, it's not a traditional BART station, it's eBART. just getting something out here, is that a huge win?
That's a huge win for the city, for the district, for the region. This was a difficult process. We started a number of years ago. The general manager, then Tom Margo, and I introduced this idea in 2001. We had a very lengthy community process, and because we knew there needed to be local input, we established an eBART Policy Advisory Committee, which was comprised of elected officials from Pittsburg, Antioch, Brentwood, and Oakley, and the county and BART. We went through a very, very lengthy process looking at all of the alternatives, and at the end of the decision-making process, there was a unanimous decision from this eBART Policy Advisory Committee. It wasn't a unilateral decision by BART. It was a collaborative decision with locally elected officials. The unanimous decision was to support eBART to Antioch, and because of that decision, we were able to round up the necessary funds, and this $524 million project will be open to revenue service in May.
And that's a 60% savings, about?
About 60% savings, which was a large part of the decision making. We had a couple of things that were really important. The Contra Costa Transportation Authority was beginning the improvement to Highway 4, so if we didn't have a project, there would be no median that would be reserved for rail in the future. So we had to meet that deadline, which was a good deadline because it made people make a decision. And we had to come to a conclusion about how we would fund this project, whatever the final alternative that was selected. So cost certainly played into it. The difference between what's out there, this $524 million project, and Classic BART was about $750 million. And none of us, including me, saw where that money might come from in the short term. We could have gone with Classic BART. We could have waited out the financing on a regional basis, but that would have been very risky. We certainly wouldn't have that out there right now. An example is the City of Livermore is now going through an EIR, Environmental Impact Report process, for a 5-mile extension to Isabel. They're looking at the various alternatives, including a DMU, light rail, a bus rapid transit, and Classic BART. And the Classic BART is about $1.6 billion for a 5-mile extension. And if that's the alternative that's ultimately selected, and we'll make that decision later this year, under the best circumstances, they'll be in revenue service in 2026. And I can tell you my experience at BART, those time schedules often slip because of financing, environmental factors, and just construction constraints. So at the best case scenario, we would have been another decade or so away from having any rail out here.
So can you clarify for the audience kind of what the process is with eBART going to Pittsburg, kind of the time between Antioch to Pittsburg, what it's going to be like, and then the transfer of trains?
Sure. So it's a 10.5 minute trip from Antioch Station to the transfer station outside of Pittsburg Bay Point. The incremental cost of going from Antioch to the transfer station is 80 cents. So you'll pay the 80 cents on top of whatever the remainder of your trip is. That's based on our distance-based fare policy, which prices trips depending on how long it is. It's very complicated and very sophisticated, but the number came out to 80 cents for the Antioch station and 15 cents for the Pittsburg Center station. So, for example, if your trip is from Pittsburg Bay Point to Embarcadero, it would be $6.70. If it's from Pittsburg Center to Embarcadero, it'll be $6.85, and if it's from Antioch to Embarcadero, it'll be $7.50.
Which is cheaper than the bridge.
Which is much cheaper than the bridge, and those of us who use public transportation on a regular basis will be on a train going past congestion around Loveridge Road into Antioch. Into Pittsburg. So I think it, for me and a lot of people who are looking forward to this extension, this is a fair cost. Again, nobody likes to pay more for anything, But if you get a return on that, I think people are more accepting. So once you get on the train in Antioch, you'll make a stop at Pittsburg Center, then you'll pull into the transfer station in, it's about 3,000 feet east of Pittsburg Bay Point. Waiting for you will be a BART train. The eBART doors will open, you'll walk across this 27-foot platform, you'll enter the train, guaranteed a seat, nobody's going to be on the train, so you're guaranteed a seat on our train, and then that train will make its first stop at Pittsburg Bay Point and go into the whatever trip you're embarking on. So I would urge people to go onto the BART website, go under projects. There's an East Contra Costa County extension project, and there's an animation of the transfer station on that site. It shows exactly what the process is, how the eBART train will pull into the station, open the doors, and walk across. That transfer platform is not intended for people to spend a lot of time on.
Sure.
So if there isn't a BART car there, they won't open the doors. The good news is the systems can talk to each other. We know how long it takes to get to the station, so we should be able to coordinate that pretty well. 100% of the time, nothing works 100% of the time. But we don't want people on the platform lingering, and there's no way to get there except on BART or eBART.
So once you get on at Antioch and you've done your Clipper card thing, you're not going to Pittsburgh and doing the Clipper card. It's kind of, you're already in the system.
You're already in the system. Once you run your Clipper card at Antioch, you make your transfer at the transfer station. If you go to Fremont or Richmond or San Francisco or Millbrae or the airport, when you get off, the fare machine in that location will read your card, know you entered in Antioch, and charge the appropriate fare here.
Got it. So you said something interesting. When the eBART was decided on, Highway 4 was being planned, the expansion. If there was no medians reserved for you guys, could that have just killed it altogether?
The engineers are great. They can engineer about, give them enough money, enough time, they can engineer around about any,
Sure.
But it would have certainly add substantially to the cost. One of the reasons that the Livermore extension is going to be so expensive is in the 580 corridor, they put in those express lanes.
Yep.
So there's no median currently for any rail extension. So the freeway is going to have to be modified to move over the express lanes so that we create a median. That's going to add substantially to the cost, which is why that 5-mile extension is about $300 million a mile.
So is that similar to what could potentially happen in the future with Hillcrest to Sand Creek?
No, fortunately, our partners at CCTA and the Eastern Contra Costa Fee and Finance Authority, when they purchased the right-of-way for the BART extension, they included a 250-foot right-of-way from Hillcrest out to Balfour. So that right-of-way exists, and we could extend eBART to Brentwood or beyond, depending on politics, money, and community support.
So what does that say about good planning?
Well, I like to say it. A lot of people had vision for the future. We were very active in trying to influence those decisions. We think we have a good corridor out here that ultimately will be able to be expanded. And the best bargain in the Bay Area is a 5-mile extension of eBART to Sand Creek. It's under $300 million. I know that's a lot of money for a lot of people, but you couldn't build that rail extension anywhere else in the Bay Area for that amount of money.
And that planning dated all the way back to 2001?
Well, 2001 was when we started talking about the extension, and the local officials through what's called Transplan, which is an advisory committee to Contra Costa Transportation Authority and its Fee and Finance Authority. We all had conversations, and so there's a lot of elected officials who have served on those groups over the years, and it was their judgment and wisdom that allowed us to have this incredible planning environment that we have today.
Do you want to read? So one of the other things with the Sand Creek project is you guys just approved a bridge in the area. Can you kind of share a little bit about that? Because I know information went out, but it's not really understood what it is and what it'll provide.
Sure, Mike. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about that. That's an exciting part of what we're doing these days. So after BART adopted the eBART as the approved alternative, we funded a next phase study of $300,000 of BART funds were used to identify a future rail extension in the 4 corridor. Through this process, again, it was collaborative. The cities and county all participated. We identified the McCollum Trail location as the preferred alternative for our next rail extension. In anticipation of that, we've been focusing on a Tri-Delta Transit Center. I think we're calling it Brentwood Intermodal Transit Center at Sand Creek these days, but it's be served by Tri-Delta. So it's a 10 to 20 acre site at the intersection or near the McCollum Trail and Highway 4 that would initially be used as bus service to the Antioch station and ultimately could be a transit center. Now, if you don't get the land when it's available, if you don't purchase it years in advance of when the demand is there, when the demand is there and the politics are good and the money's available, you can't afford to do it because the property values rise so much. So what's really needed for us is to acquire this property as quickly as we can and put it into public ownership and then convert it into a park and ride. Now that's been the model out here in eastern Contra Costa County for those who've been here a long time. They'll remember that before there was the Pittsburg Bay Point BART Station, there was a Bailey Road park and ride. Yep. There's been a park and ride on Bliss Avenue where the Pittsburg Center Station is for years. And of course, the Antioch Station was the Antioch Park and Ride. So this is a model that I think we can duplicate in Brentwood, start out with a park and ride and morph to a transit center when people are ready to pursue that. So in anticipation of that, we've been working with our partners at Contra Costa Transportation Authority to find a way to build the McCollum Trail overpass. When the Highway 4 was built, it cut the McCollum Trail right in half. The reason we have interest in it as a transit agency, whether this station is served initially by buses and then by train, there will be those who will be able to walk and bicycle to the center. So we want to be able to ensure that access exists.
Is that kind of like how the Oakland Coliseum is, that kind of bridge
That's
thing?
the same idea,
Okay.
Exactly the same idea. So the good news is the BART board very recently unanimously approved $200,000 from our access funds to match $600,000 from Contra Costa Transportation Authority to do the final design for the McCollum Trail Bridge. That's going to take some months, but once it's done, the project will be what's called project ready, shovel ready. So we then are in a position to file for grants at very regional, state, federal level to be able to actually build the bridge. So this is an incredibly important first step, because a shovel-ready project, when money becomes available, when pots of money that we're not even thinking about right now become available, we'll be able to submit this project as something that can be built in a short period of time.
Sure. And so one of the other things that was interesting to me is there's a lot of talk about security with BART and homeless coming out to Antioch and then eventually Brentwood with that extension. You have a certain board member who will remain nameless, kind of using the media as a tool for her political campaign in the future for a higher office. You guys have great police. I don't care what anyone says. These guys and girls are bad dudes and women. What's kind of the plan or outline with BART coming out here? What kind of your guys' police department's good to do, and how do you handle that?
Good. I think it's important. There's a lot of interest in that. So in last year's budget, we were able to get an additional beat identified for eastern Contra Costa County. So it'll be a beat that'll be specifically from Orinda out to Antioch. We won't have to split the services of the police department. Like many police departments, BART is understaffed. We have a new chief, and he is aggressively trying to fill the ranks of the department. So that's step number one. We have to fully staff the police department. And if you've seen any of our BART cars recently, they're wrapped with messages about BART is hiring police officers. So we're doing all we can to get the message out, and hopefully if there's anyone in your listening audience that's interested in a career in law enforcement, you ought to consider BART. The wages and benefits are a pretty good package, and it's just a good agency to work for. We have an incredibly good chief of police. So I'm not trying to undermine the local chiefs who also are recruiting.
They're your partners.
Yeah, they are definitely our partners, and we just want to be sure people are aware of that opportunity. We've met with the city manager and the mayor, and we're working on some plans. We are very much aware of the potential for homeless to become a problem at this station site. So we're trying to get ahead of it. The mayor and city manager have been very open to have conversations about this, and I'm hopeful we can come up with a plan around June that would allow us to, in a proactive way, try to prevent a lot of the problems people are worried about. Our budget cycle begins in April, so if we can put together a plan in conjunction with Antioch, I would support a budget item during the budget process that would provide some resources to deal with the issue. We've met with the faith community, we've met with business leaders. The last thing we want this thing to do is to become an eyesore. So as one of the ministers said, it's got that new smell right now. Let's keep it that way, and I couldn't agree more with that minister.
So in terms of security, did the eBART carts have cameras in them?
The eBART cars have cameras in them. The BART parking lot has the most cameras in a parking lot of any station in the district. And those are wired directly to the maintenance facility right across the freeway from here. We have a mutual aid agreement with the Antioch Police Department, so we should be able to watch what's going on there and take appropriate action.
What about with Oakley? Is Oakley PD involved a little bit since that is on the border?
Well, that's a good point. We have not talked to Oakley PD, and that's probably something we should think about doing. I've talked to the elected officials in Oakley, but I think certainly we should make them aware, because if there were something catastrophic, an earthquake or something, that we'd need regional emergency support. So that's a good thing to pursue.
One thing that really interests me with BART is you guys are kind of like a punching bag to certain media. It's always fun to go for the low-hanging fruit. When there's a slow news day, they kind of find something's wrong with you guys. One thing that's rarely talked about is some of the positives you guys bring to the community, which is actually home values. Do you have any numbers or figures that would kind of showcase the positives of a new station?
So we do. In 2015, the Contra Costa homeowners. No, let me just get this right. The Contra Costa Association of Realtors did a study of values in proximity to BART. Let me just read one of the quotes before I talk about what those values are. Anything that's got proximity to BART, you're going to see those places really skyrocketing in terms of sales, and the rental market has gotten out of control as well. And that was based on their assessment that within a half mile of a BART station, this is on average, so it's going to vary based on community and based on location. In Contra Costa County, within a half mile of the station, the property values increased 12.9%. What that means for a single family home is on average, about $51,000, and for a condominium, about $61,000. And as you go further away from a half mile to a mile, it's a 10% increment. Mile to 2 miles is 6.4, and 3 miles to 2 miles to 5 miles is 3%. So if this pattern holds true, and we'll just have to wait and see what the marketplace is, but if this pattern holds true, not only will this be a transportation benefit for people here in Antioch, it will also increase their property values.
Which in turn, with the property tax, gives more money to the cities. They could do more things for the community. So it's kind of a nice circle of life type of thing.
That's right. That's absolutely right. the city's lifeline are property taxes and sales taxes, and as those increase, their ability to do more with police services and parks and recreation and streets and just general appearance of a community, those are resources that every city council needs in order to make a difference in the quality of life in their community.
Yeah, and then I know we're going to wrap this up here shortly, but I want to kind of jump around your guys' communications at BART. I think you guys do a fabulous job. I do wish you had more East County information. Sorry, Alicia. She's great, though. You guys have a great system that gives alerts on delays. You know, every time there's a 10-minute delay, an email goes out. Really proactive on Twitter. Can you talk about how important it is for your agency that made that investment towards communications?
Right. I think our riders are very tech savvy, perhaps more than the general population, certainly as equal to the general population. So in order to communicate directly with them, we've had to invest in the modern technology. They're younger, they're smarter, they have a lot of tech jobs. So in order to meet their needs, we've had to make these investments. Now the benefit has been the general public also has the ability to know what's happening. If there's a BART train delay, a major BART train delay in one of our corridors, you can expect there's going to be fallout from that. So it helps a lot of people. We have an app for reporting criminal activity on our trains, which people use frequently. They can it's BART alerts. You email direct or text directly to the department, tell them what train you're on, what the problem is, and we will dispatch resources if they're available to meet the train and try to deal with that. So we try in every way we can to support our riders. Look, if we don't have a good customer experience, ridership's going to go down. And as we talked about property tax being important to cities, fare box recovery is important to BART. Yep. We have one of the highest in the nations, about 70+%. And if the number of riders goes down, it affects the entire operations, because that represents a lot of money that we can reinvest into the system. And we're not perfect. We're like any agency anywhere, but we try to be responsive to people's concerns. We try to make the investments in areas where we know we're falling short, and we try to be sure that we remain a world-class transportation agency. And I think we are. One of the things that I often hear about are the employees. I can tell you that we have
the janitor.
The janitor, and that was regrettable. But we have employees, unsung heroes, who work in our shops, who keep these 429 rail cars that are now 40+ years open. Just think if you had a car in your garage that was 40 years old, had the doors open hundreds of millions of times. It traveled millions of miles. It carried millions of passengers, and every morning it has to be ready to go, or you can't service the riders. So our workers in our shops, they work all night. They deliver the necessary cars every morning to make sure that we have enough equipment to provide service to 420,000+ trips a day. So they don't get enough credit. They get a lot of criticism. But these are hardworking men and women who do a yeoman job to make sure that the transportation in the Bay Area serves everyone who relies on BART and public transportation.
And so you said a few things there, interestingly, about the cost recovery and maintaining the system. I know people don't like rate increases. They don't like paying additional for parking, but you sometimes have to do that to offset the cost because you have to maintain the infrastructure. What is the biggest issues right now with infrastructure you guys are facing, just maintaining?
So we have, the board has set a top 3 priority in order to rebuild the system. That's the 775 rail cars, which we have a full funding plan for. We just raised rates on January 1st, and as you said, nobody likes paying more, including me and probably you. But all the money from that, what's called a biannual rate increase, is dedicated to a fund that goes into capital reinvestment. So in order to pay for those 775 rail cars, BART has to come up with 25% of the cost, and the Metropolitan Transportation Commission will come up with the other 75%. So that biannual fare increase goes into that fund, which allows us to pay for those 775 cars. So that's one of the big three. The second of the big three is the expansion of the Hayward Maintenance Facility. If you are expecting to have 775 new cars, there's just no way you can maintain them in the current infrastructure. So we're in the process of dramatically expanding the Hayward facility to accommodate the new cars as they arrive. At some point, we're going to have the 400 plus old cars and the 700 plus new cars. The system was never designed to accommodate that number of cars. So the Hayward Maintenance Facility is mostly financed, and we'll continue to work on making that fully funded. The third and perhaps biggest component, which is not very glamorous, is our train control, which is now 40 plus years old. We're going to completely rebuild it, go to a radio transmission type of train control. It will allow us to reduce the headway, which is the distance between which cars can travel closely together, from the current 15-minute restriction to 12 minutes. Doesn't seem like a lot.
Over the course of a day.
That gives us a 25% more throughput through the Transbay tube, which is our big choke point. Every train in the system ultimately goes through that Transbay tube. If we can increase that capacity by 25%, we've made huge strides. That's about $1 billion investment. We've identified a substantial amount of money for that. We're doing the design right now. We won't know the final cost until we bid it, and then we'll have to round up the rest of the dough. The other component that's coming up, and again, none of us like taxes or fee increases, this Regional Measure 3, which is increasing the bridge tolls. In that expenditure plan, our finances for 306 new cars, which will give us a total of 1,081. If that passes, that will allow us to run 10-car trains on every run, every day throughout the system, which increases our capacity dramatically. You throw in the reduction in the headway, we'll be able to accommodate what we think is a 500,000 trips in the next decade. So we're planning for growth and planning for that. The other thing that's in RM3 that I think is important to Eastern Contra Costa County voters is $15 million for the Intermodal Transit Center in Brentwood. If that goes forward, there'll be money for construction of that McCollum Trail Bridge and the development of the Brentwood Transit Center.
And I'm just looking at it from a number standpoint, $8 to $9 to cross a bridge. It makes BART that much more attractive.
and for people, I haven't driven into San Francisco in years, so I don't know what that means. But
take BART.
for people who do, once you get across the bridge, you can't park, and even if you can park, it's so horribly expensive. And downtown is so congested, the financial district is so congested. So people tell us that it's a bargain to get across the bay.
Yeah, so one thing I really appreciate about you is that every time that I've kind of asked a question, you're very responsive. You know, a lot of people have complained about the eBART system coming to Antioch versus an actual BART. One thing I think that's different about you is you've always said, well, if you got a problem, come on down, let's talk about it. Where does that come from?
I don't know. Maybe my parents. I don't know. It's look, I don't think we have anything to hide. And one thing I've learned over the years that I've been in public office is if you leave a vacuum of information, somebody will fill it, and that may not be with accurate information. So if you want to eliminate that vacuum of information, you better fill it with your own information. You mentioned the eBART. When we did the final EIR, we did a section. It's called the master responses to the main questions, and those questions: why is BART pursuing a DMU train? Why not conventional BART? I have that document, and I'm happy to leave a copy with you. I'm happy to leave my email address or cell phone number, and anybody who would like to review this document, I'm happy to provide them with the document. It goes over all the reasons why this advisory committee came to the conclusion that doing something now and providing this transit relief was better than risking doing nothing and trying to search for a bunch of money. So, you know, and one of the reasons I'm open is because I think the facts justify what the decisions we've made. I just need to be sure that people, if they look at the facts and they come to a different conclusion, I understand that. I fully respect that. But you can't make up facts. You're entitled to your own opinion, but the facts are the facts. And if you evaluate the facts and you come to a different conclusion, again, I respect that. I've dealt with that my whole life. The eBART advisory committee came to one conclusion, the BART board came to the same conclusion, and I was part of that process, and I think it was the right decision.
Yeah, we'll throw your email on the, in the video up there so people could contact you. Can anyone take a tour of the facility, or does it have to be scheduled out?
It has to be scheduled, and if there are groups that are interested, we've done a lot of that, and we're happy to do that. The opening day is approaching. It's not as long from now as possible. I expect that we'll do a ribbon cutting, and on that day we'll provide free rides for people to the transfer station, and then begin revenue service. I'm looking for a date that I'd like to leave with you. Here it is, a date that I like to leave with. I think we've announced. Perhaps not everyone has gotten the word. We've announced that this is going to be a Clipper access station. So because we're going from the paper tickets to the Clipper tickets, I just want to be sure people know that on February 13th, between 4 and 7 at the Pittsburg Bay Point Station, we will be handing out free Clipper cards in anticipation of the opening out here. We don't want people to have to be forced to buy a Clipper card because we're making a policy change.
Sure.
So again, let me repeat that for your guests if I can.
We'll throw it in the video too.
So it's February 13th, 4 to 7. There'll be a booth at the Pittsburg Bay Point Station, and there'll be lots of information that'll be out there about our new youth discount. But one of the things they'll be doing is giving away free Clipper cars in anticipation of the May opening of the Antioch BART Station.
So finally, what I think is interesting is there's a lot of debate and chatter, like why doesn't BART go from Antioch to Brentwood to Livermore and create a giant loop? Is there even a possibility of that, and could it happen?
Well, I wouldn't want to say it's going to happen imminently, but these extensions are based on a lot of considerations, not the least of which are community support, finances, and technology. We certainly have put in place the potential for this BART to Antioch extension to continue to Brentwood and to continue there to locations in Livermore, perhaps out to Tracy. The original design of eBART was to purchase the old McCocal line and run rail from Pittsburg Bay Point to Tracy. So there are lots of options out there. We're not currently in discussions with any of the communities affected. And I certainly would not support any rail extension unless we had community support. We're not in the business of coming into town and saying, take it or leave it. We need community partners. As you've all witnessed, even with community support, there are people who oppose things. So in order to be successful, we have to be sure that there's community support. Is it going to happen in the short term? Probably not. But it's certainly an option that would be out there when the demand exists.
Makes sense to just go in a giant circle too. I mean, it gets people around, it clears up Vasco a little bit, which was never designed for commuting. So, at least it's not dead. That's a good answer, everyone.
Yeah. It's not dead. It would be one of those far-reaching projects that we'd have to give a lot of thought to.
Sure. So, well, I want to thank you so much for taking your time this morning to come on and talk BART. I know that you guys are the victims of a lot of public backlash, media, attention. So I just want to thank you for coming on, being transparent and answering some questions in your own words versus, the written word, which sometimes isn't the full quote. So I appreciate your honesty and putting out the information. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Again, this is Mike Burkholder, Contra Costa Today. Please like, subscribe, leave comments, ask questions about BART, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.